Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences, such as...
People started noticing something that I hadn't noticed. So I would sit down and play drums, and some people noticed, when you play drums, Mike, I don't see any tics in you. None. Just nothing. And that was at the same time I knew that mentally I could just get lost in it. So I got to a point where I realized, you know what? This is what's going to basically save me in my life.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. I'm going to go ahead and make an understatement. Miles R. Walker, known as King Tourette Syndrome on Instagram, and who was our guest last week, is already a Hall of Famer. There's been so much feedback about Miles written on social media and to me personally, and Miles really connected. He's also connected me with like 20 other people who would be amazing Tourette's podcast guests in the future. Anyway, there's a lot of activity around that episode. Plus, obviously, the appreciation for what he's done for the community on both sides, advocating for Tourette and making sure everybody around him who's even marginally in his life has some understanding of what Tourette Syndrome is, and including his entire neighborhood. And that was pretty popular with listeners. Please go back and listen if you haven't. Season 4, Episode 3. The title of that episode, appropriately, is Do Something to Enlighten Yourself. Speaking of, on the tail end of this episode, I'll have some info from the Tourette Association of America that you'll want to hear. It won't take long, and it's awesome news, so hang out for a minute. That'll be right after our Tourette conversation this week, which is really, really good. Whenever we have a seasonal change around here in my part of the country, it hits me, and my allergies or just something happens and my sinuses are horrible, and my voice kind of changes a bit, gets a little bit more raspy subsequently. So I don't even know why I'm talking about this. Let's get to some listeners. First, the people who wrote in over the past week who I haven't gotten back to. Thank you so much for writing, and I will reply. Anyone can send an email to tourettespodcast@gmail.com. The doors are wide open to people with Tourette, people who don't, people who have anything. Anything you want to say, tourettespodcast@gmail.com. And you can say anything you want confidentially, or you can pose a question to me for me to read on the podcast if you want some help with something. If you have a Tourette-related problem you need to sort out. The audience and the support systems around this podcast are extremely resourceful, and I think we close most reasonable cases, or, we get whoever needs a quick answer at least something to go on. Which, of course, is also the spirit behind the Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook, run by Sophia in the UK. Please don't forget to tell her thank you when you're there. She's very generous with her time, and she helps so much with awareness. So just give her a simple thank you, and you can get to know her better through Season 3, Episode 1, when she was our long overdue guest. Oh, and I just realized 10 minutes ago that because we do these episodes in seasons, and we start the serial numbers over each time, I guess I never realized the total number of episodes or bothered to count them up, and we're a few past 50 at this point, which kind of feels like, not to get all like this, but that kind of feels valuable. That, even if this podcast ends today, we could still point to this vault of more than 50 authentic conversations with real-life Touretters talking about TS with really deep honesty, no script or anything like that at all. And in some cases, this is the first time that they've talked about it in any grand sense. And that feels really valuable. It feels researchable. And no, the podcast isn't ending. I was just saying that. Big thanks to everybody supporting Tourette's podcast. Of course, the Tourette Association of America is the primary sponsor, and then we have some really cool listeners who've stepped up and have been amazing in helping the podcast grow and reach new people, and obviously Geeks Rising. That's the network this podcast is a part of. Geeksrising.com is where you can find some of my favorite podcasts, including Sunshine and Power Cuts and On the Subject, and they also feature this podcast as well. And also, real quick, just got to mention and congratulate Tourette Canada, because today, as I speak, it's October 18th, 2019. This is the first day of their annual conference in Winnipeg. And I think today they're going to illuminate the Winnipeg sign, like the big city sign with the glowing letters. They're going to light it up teal to mark the occasion, and that's a partnership between the city of Winnipeg and Tourette Canada, which is awesome. Congrats on doing that. Okay, we got a question from Brittany. She says she's going to blog about this. Brittany Hooker has a great blog. It's tiktokts.wordpress.com. And she's also contributed to tourettespodcast.com. She says, quote, "In the name of the Halloween season, what fears do you and others have related to your TS? For example, I'm afraid to stand in long lines, etc." End quote. So that's from Brittany Hooker. And this question is also for you, the listener. You can tweet at us at Tourette'sPod or submit your answer through any other channel. My answer would be, and I think I've talked about this before, I'm afraid of something going wrong in an airport. In terms of somebody seeing me ticking and thinking something else is going on. And me spinning that around in my head will, of course, inflame my tics a little bit more. I've never had any trouble. I mean, I fly, I guess, fairly frequently. I've never had any trouble, but all you have to do is go back like 2 clicks to episode 2 of this season with Maggie and her mom, Denise, and the airplane story they had. I mean, there was a sweet ending to it, but they still had to go through some anxious and really embarrassing stuff that just all revolved around TS or the presence of TS in an airport. So I know that answer isn't very Halloweenish, but that's where I still definitely have anxiety. Thank you for the question, Brittany. And when you write your answer on your blog, which again is tiktokts.wordpress.com, Tick is spelled T-I-C, by the way. And I'll link to it from tourettespodcast.com when that comes out. Okay, got another question on Twitter from a parent whose son with TS was denied a 504 plan at school. So this parent wants the bottom line and some info on the podcast for people overall about 504 plans or individualized lesson plans meant to help kids with circumstances like TS get the education flow that works better for them. So again, this question comes from a parent who was denied that. So right after that, the Tourette Association shared some info with this parent directly about 504 plans. But I also spoke with them today, and we're going to plan a segment about that real soon. Just kind of an explainer. So if your child is denied a 504 plan or an individualized lesson plan or individualized education plan, then you'll have the info to know whether that decision from the school was legitimate or not. Plus, it's just really good stuff to know. So anyway, that's going to come up soon here on this podcast. Okay, one more from Reggie. Hey, Reggie. Quote, "Comments and stories about the number and range of comorbid disorders with Tourette's has been really eye-opening. Though there are some common ones, the breadth and variety has really added a lot of context for how Tourette's impacts the lives of people who have it." So that's from Reggie, who went on to say, "It seems everybody's specific experience is really varied and different, but it also highlights how adaptive and flexible, no pun intended, we all have to learn to be, beyond just dealing with and explaining our tics." End quote. Thank you, Reggie, for what ends up being a wonderful segue to this week's conversation with a professional musician. Mike Miller is a drummer. He's a solid drummer. Watch his videos on Instagram, Mike Miller Drums. That's his handle. And in his bio, the first thing you see is the phrase, advocate for Tourette Syndrome. And he really goes for it. A drummer with Tourette Syndrome who's all in on doing things for the community. But TS is not the only involuntary thing to have hugely impacted his life. When he was really young, it was discovered that he couldn't hear like the people around him. Mike had 40% hearing loss and had to undergo treatments. And you'll hear him talk about that. But the dynamics of loving music and making music for as long as he can remember, but also this with the hearing. And anyway, there's a really cool follow-up on that you'll hear about. And a partial spoiler, he becomes superhuman. I'm not even kidding. Here's me and drummer Mike Miller.
So my name is Mike Miller. I currently live just outside of Austin, Texas, in a city called Leander. Mm-hmm. I'm born and raised in Northern California. I'm originally from the Bay Area, and we relocated here a couple of years ago. I have a pretty interesting background in a lot of ways. Obviously, music is a big part of it, but there was a lot of challenges I had to overcome, getting to the point where I could even enjoy music. And things of that nature. So
Yeah.
it's a big part of my life, but I'm very grateful for it because it really has saved me in many, many ways.
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to get into all of that. Do you do anything besides music? I mean, I know you as a drummer, but is there
Yeah.
another part of your life?
Yeah, I also work a job too. So I have a wife and 4 kids. So we have a busy life, and that was kind of one of the reasons we decided to come out here as well. Again, born and raised in the Bay Area was great, but there's a lot of things I think a little bit better for us as a family to be out here, and we have family out here. We have for many, many years, so that was a helpful reason for coming out here. So
Nice.
we have a busy life. My wife and I have been married 13 years, gonna be 14 next year. So we have a great life, and we have a lot of blessings that we continually, have get and have had through all the years. So definitely a lot of great things.
Is music kind of a greater theme in the family, or is it mainly just a thing with you? Or
Great question. Yeah, no, we had a musical household growing up. My parents were into music. My dad is an incredible musician. He plays everything. He's great at keys, guitar. He can arrange. He can play things. The only area I haven't beat is in drums. That's the one area I got to beat. He can play drums, but it's that's where I can kind of overtake him there. But no, my parents are very musically inclined. Music was a big part of our life growing up. I'm one of 4 siblings, and so we all obviously love music and have been involved in it for a long time.
And not to skip ahead too much, but
Sure.
with the genetic aspect of TS, have you spotted that elsewhere in your family, or is it just you?
It's funny you mentioned that. I have a family member who I've noticed, I've seen over the years, who has some tics. Hard to say if he has full-on Tourette's or not, because you can have obviously tics and not have Tourette's or little habits and things. But I've not met anybody else in my family who has full-on Tourette syndrome, at least that I could tell or that I know about.
When did you kind of come into your own and discover the drums and kind of have your own musical identity?
Yeah, well, so it's an interesting aspect because I was apparently banging on pots and pans since I was a little kid. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear a lot of that for many, many years. So it was kind of ironic in the sense that, I liked music, but I still couldn't hear a lot of it or, enunciate a lot of it either. But
and explain that real quick too for just to kind of bring us all up to speed.
Sure.
So TS is not the only thing in your background. It's hearing loss as well.
Yeah. So I had a lot of hearing issues as a kid. I only had about 40% hearing on a good day, I guess. As a child. So I obviously didn't hear well, nor did I speak well or enunciate well for that reason. They both kind of go hand in hand. And I had about 6 or 7 surgeries that I can remember before I was 10 years old.
Wow.
It was basically at least once a year. So I had to go in and have repairs. I had lots of tubes because I had massive ear infections and adenoids removed and all kinds of other things. Unfortunately, a lot of my early childhood, I remember being in the hospital having surgery.
Wow.
In fact, I had to do kindergarten twice because I just missed so much school the first year. And so that was very difficult. So that was a challenge because obviously being in a musical family and not having a lot of hearing, it's tough to not have hearing as a general, but when you want to be in music and you like music, it's hard not to have the hearing that it did. But it really was it was hard because it was one of these linger things where, dealing with hearing loss, it was very debilitating, right? It was hard to get and just, to deal with life. And, not only was I not hearing well, I was in pain a lot. I would cry, I would have, apparently when I was even younger, I could remember that I can't remember my parents would tell me that, I would be in a lot of pain and discomfort too.
Is this something that you're still dealing with or?
Yeah, no, it actually got a lot better. It recovered. I had a really great ENT doctor who I knew, and we've known him personally for many, many years. He had a lot to do with it. And those are the things where I look back and go, man, I'm so glad I had him in my life, because if I didn't have him around, I may not have the hearing I have today. In fact, my hearing, and I don't know if it still is or not, but for many years was better than normal hearing. So I could hear a lot of frequencies that not everybody could hear.
Yeah.
And so like really high frequencies, almost like dog whistle frequencies, I could hear parts, certain high parts of that for a while, just because I think it was almost like overcorrection in a sense. But so I went from having terrible hearing to really, really good hearing.
So how does that, and I want to get back to the pots and pans real quick, but,
Sure.
how does that interplay with your music? Being able to hear frequencies. I mean, that sounds to me like that would be an asset with, production and tone and
Yeah.
things like that.
It's really helpful. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think about it because it's just, that's normal to me, right? It's
Yeah.
just in a sense where,
Yeah.
but I've noticed that I hear things that maybe other people might not hear. And I go, I wonder, but you can start to tell like, yeah, these are things that, I can really hear kind of the fine lines in between. It's a big help. I mean, I listen a lot in music, for many reasons, but it's really an advantage that I'm very grateful for.
Wow.
But yeah, it really does affect in a good way.
Wow. So, okay. So back to pots and pans, just as early as you can remember, you were keeping rhythm.
Yeah. It was just in my blood. It was just something that I wanted to do. And I did that for many years. And then obviously as my hearing slowly got a little better, it took a while for it to get better, but as it got better, of course, I started to get more involved in musical things.
Mm-hmm.
I got my first drum set. I wouldn't call it, I mean, it was kind of one of those drum sets where it looked like a drum set and it had like paper heads on it. So they weren't going to last that long.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember getting it for my birthday and it was in my dad's trunk and I just went nuts because I thought, oh my goodness, I got a drum set, and that's when I started just mashing around on it. And it lasted probably a few months before my brothers finally broke it, of course. So, but that's really when I, started to, really, once you get that instrument in your hand, there's just no going back. It's just what I wanted to do. Just like someone who takes photography, they get that camera in their hand, they take those pictures and you're like, yeah, this is it. This is what, makes me excited. This is what gets me alive, is taking these photos. Or someone who, creates art. That's really what that was. It was like, I needed that brush to put in my hand. So, and then I got my first real drum set at 10 years old. It was this banged up used drum kit that my dad got, but it was the most beautiful thing in the world to me, at least. Right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, so at 10, at what point were you kind of showing signs of TS or ticking? And I mean, do you remember kind of how that came on, or was that too young?
Yeah, that was earlier too. It all happened at one time. No, I remember actually, I do remember this, oddly enough. I was almost 5 years old and I was sitting in a doctor's office, this neurologist's office, who was a big part of my life for many, many years.
Right.
And he diagnosed me with Tourette Syndrome. And of course, I didn't know what it was. I didn't, nobody else knew what it was, of course. But in fact, that was the mid to late 80s.
Right.
I mean, think about the awareness then; it was nothing.
Absolutely, yeah, totally true.
So I remember getting diagnosed with that, and I'm young enough at that point where I don't really understand the magnitude of it. I just know that it's something else, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm already fighting one battle now. I'm fighting two battles, and I didn't really understand how much harder it would get, and you obviously have an understanding of that too, how difficult it can get. But it was definitely tough. When people say this is something you'll have for your life or forever, you don't understand that at the age I was. But
right.
As the years started to go by, and then life got a lot harder from a physical standpoint, a mental, emotional, and just dealing with people in the world, of course, who didn't understand. So that became really the bigger challenge in my ears, because as my ears were getting a little bit better, obviously this was accelerating.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. So the challenges that you're referencing, did they make you want to go kind of inward and sort of keep it a secret and kind of avoid the conversation as much as you could?
Yeah, I had a bit of a big pendulum swing, in the sense that initially it was I didn't want to really, because I didn't even know enough about it. I didn't feel confident kind of describing it to somebody.
Yeah.
And as I learned more and more. The hard thing about it, and this, is just it gets worse. It was tough. I mean, when I got back in school, there's a lot of young kids who don't understand. So they make fun of you, right? They make comments, they stare. I mean, you know that feeling. You feel like the world's staring at you.
Yeah.
You feel like the world is looking at you like something's wrong with him. What's wrong? And you don't quite understand it either. And that was the one side of it. So that not only was hard from emotional, just thinking people are watching me, I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to kind of hide. But then there's the physical aspect, which just wore me out. Right. Because I had all kinds of tics. You can get all types of tics. I had verbal, I had motor tics, I had, extremities, all the above. I had the entire the entire, slate of tics.
Yeah.
So I was physically worn out. So I was mentally, emotionally worn out from dealing with other people. I remember there were nights where my back was so overworked and tight. I had my mom and dad had to sit there and just rub my back for hours, just so I could fall asleep. Just like that was really the only time I had peace was when I was sleeping. So that was really tough. It was tough because I didn't want to deal with it. And so, it's funny. It was almost, as weird as it sounds, the more I got through my early years, I had to start kind of picking and choosing what I needed to care about, right? I couldn't fight every battle. For me, I got to a point where I just wanted to get through a day physically and emotionally. So I started not even really caring about the outside comments and stares, because I just needed to get through the day.
Right.
And that was really what the challenge was for me.
Wow. I mean, well, the other thing too, and this sounds like I'm kind of making light of this, and I promise I'm not, but it's just being a drummer means you're also kind of in demand too.
Right.
I know this from my musical background and the two drummers that I ended up playing, with, because they were the ones I met. And everybody wants a drummer. I mean, were you kind of getting noticed and establishing yourself in that respect, or in some kind of musical respect as well? Like as you're also dealing with this?
Interesting you say that. Initially, no. And what it was I was just drumming was just really my outlet initially. I was just trying to do something to calm myself. And see, it was frustrating early years of my life just to get through life, right? It was frustrating. It could get really frustrating, as you know, it can get overwhelming, and you just want to break. You just want to break from all the anguish that you're taking upon yourself, that you're dealing from the outside. It was interesting when I was younger, about 10, 11, 12, people started noticing something that I hadn't noticed. So I would sit down and play drums, and some people noticed, when you play drums, Mike, I don't see any tics in you. None.
Yeah.
No verbal, obviously no extremities because I'm using them for music, just nothing. And that was at the same time I knew that mentally I could just get lost in it. I could sound terrible. I could bang around. It didn't matter. That was it. But so I got to a point where I realized, you know what? This is what's going to basically save me in my life. This is right here. And this is something a gift I was given for a reason. And, that was where I started having the change of mindset, because I was very frustrated as a kid. It was tough, obviously not hearing well, getting that back, and then dealing with the Tourette's. It was very tough for me because I just wanted to quit so many days. And obviously, as I've talked to people with TS over the years, I know they all understand that, and they all have a certain battle they want to overcome.
Right.
The days are tough. But I had this gift that became my medicine. I mean, it was really what saved my mind and my body was music.
Yeah.
And as I started to realize that, I started to kind of use it to hide behind it, right? Maybe not hide that, but it really is my right? Because I could stand up on a stage and do all my tics all day, and people stare at me, or I could get behind a drum set and nobody would ever know, right? Because I could play for hours and you wouldn't know until I walked off stage that I had Tourette syndrome. And then of course it would all go crazy after that fact. But that's really what not only helped, it helped me from a musical standpoint to get obviously out there early and get noticed and work with great musicians, but even from a mental standpoint and just emotionally, it saved me as well. So it was kind of like I put a shield in front of me and said, I'm going out into the world and this is what's going to take me there.
Do you have any theories about that, about why your tics kind of take a holiday when you get on the drum throne? Is it just because you can kind of hyper focus, or is it just the kinetic aspect of it to where you're kind of satisfying what your body would want out of you anyway? Or what do you think?
There's a couple aspects you can take that route. I'll just kind of give, again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a brilliant doctor. I can't, but I do know that for people who have disorders like this, there always seems to be a connection and some kind of outlet, right?
Right.
So I remember I met a basketball player a few times growing up named Chris Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
He played for the Denver Nuggets, and he converted to Islam and changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf.
That's right.
And I grew up in the Bay Area. I was a big Warriors fan, and my parents knew their public relations person there, and she arranged several meetings for us after Warriors games to go in the locker room, and I got to meet him a few times and talk. But
Oh, wow.
The reason I mention him is because he was one of the best free throw shooters of all time. He was like a 90% shooter. And then, of course, there's a kind of a sad story in the political aspect down the road that he was, out of the league. But for many years, he was an incredible free throw shooter because he would just practice over and over again. He would have to make a certain amount every night before he went home and all these things. So he became obsessive. And of course, everybody with Tourette syndrome is obsessive at some level.
That's right.
And that's just the nature of the beast,
Feels like it.
So he was able to really what it came to, I think, was to able to focus the outlet to something good, right? Because I could sit inside all day and go crazy, or I could take that energy and turn it and put it into something. It's going to come out one way or the other. So I could put it into something good. And drums is very repetitive, right? There's a lot up and down, left, right, over and over stuff. And so that's where I could refocus and repurpose that outward energy. So that's really the, I think kind of I don't know if it's called scientific, but that's a little more like that. My personal kind of just overall positive belief is that I believe that everyone's created for a reason. I believe that everybody is a certain way for a reason. I don't think there's accidents. I believe that there's a reason that people have the things they do, and it's to make them be better at something else, or it's to allow them to go a certain road, right? So I personally believe that, I have Tourette syndrome, but I had music was already in my body because I was going to need it, right? It was going to be my medicine. It was going to be my guidance. And so there's no scientific, research behind that, but that's just kind of an overall, positive outlook that I have on that.
You have a pretty good following on social media as well. Are there other drummers with TS who've connected with you and have had, I guess, kind of similar experiences?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, when I first got in the Instagram world, I didn't focus on it as much as I wanted to over a few years. And so I didn't have a lot of that energy or a lot of information on the page, right? So, but at one point I decided to update the information, and I actually put that on my page, on my bio and in my posts, and I started talking more about it. And right when I did that, I got several messages. I mean, just right away. People had said, "Oh my goodness, I have it," or "My brother has it." I got a message from a company. The guy makes bass drum beaters. So on the bass drum pedal, he's in Dominican Republic, I think. And he said, "My son is 7 and has it." Like, sent me a message. I was like, holy smokes, how crazy. I didn't do anything but just update my bio. That's all I did. And so so it hit me. I thought, you know what? This is telling me something right now. Right. I need to start being more outspoken about it. I need to start, encouraging. And so I started changing my posts just to be more positive, even if I wasn't talking about Tourette syndrome, just talking about gifting. And, if you've seen any of them, I try to be positive, use quotes from people that are, very positive. Yeah. Just because there's a lot of people hurting, it's kind of an overall, in the world dealing with things. But if I could use the things I've gone through in my life to encourage others, especially youth, I was going to do it. Right. So that's really what changed my mentality on the social media side. I'm going to use this for, good. I'm going to use this for, to encourage people. So I'm not even where I want to be. I actually wanted to start doing more of it. Just even from a video standpoint from myself, like, instead of just playing, maybe talking, but that's a long-term, goal. But just changing that information and starting to talk about it more on my site. I get messages all the time from people who are saying, "Oh yeah, I know somebody," or "I have it," or "I'm somehow connected or affected by it."
So you've done a lot of touring too with various bands. What about people who were sort of outside of the world of TS, who you just happen to be playing with, or just want to say, "Hey, you guys did great," or somebody from the audience or anything like that? I mean, does TS ever get picked up on ticking, any clues like that that kind of spark that conversation? Or well, as you know, anytime you're standing next to somebody and you start having ticks left and right, there can always be a question or a conversation. I think it comes back to the same thing where people would say, "I would have never known that," right? If you're seeing someone sees you on stage and you talk to them afterwards and they see you doing things and they ask, and I tell them, they go, "Wow, I would have never known that. I never saw you do it." I have people tell me all the time, "I've never seen you do that on stage." Right. Yeah. You're right. I don't. So I can't explain that other than I think there's a mental aspect of repurposing that energy, like I mentioned. And you know what I mean by that energy. It's that output, that building burst that comes with Tourette syndrome that we all deal with.
Yeah, I've had many people ask, and over the years, I've had a lot of people ask. And what's interesting is I've had people tell me recently that, that I've known or just that I've never really heard this from, that have reached out to me and said, hey, love your stuff. I'm proud of you. Great to see you all these years, dude. I mean, just stuff I never even thought about. Because to be honest, I never think about that when I'm doing it. I really want to encourage people. And if it affects them, that's awesome. I think that's a great thing.
The Tourette Association of America has been around since 1972, and today is the premier nonprofit in the U.S. working for all people affected by Tourette and tic disorders. One of the ways that happens is through communications and awareness tools, which is one of the reasons why the Tourette Association is the primary sponsor of this podcast. They help me out a lot, and you can find tons of information on their website, tourette.org, TOURETTE.org. And I want to thank them for their support of Tourette's podcast. Does your ticking affect you in other ways in your adult life that you have to kind of contend with? I mean, a lot of that, informs the motivational speaking part of it, but what are the challenges that you're still dealing with?
It's not as hard for me mentally or emotionally anymore. And I'll say mentally, emotionally, just because I'm not overwhelmed by it. I know how to manage it, right? I mean, we all have bad days and good days and bad days. For example, I can go into a meeting and be fine, but the second I get out of that meeting, which is stressful, it's going to all come out. The tics are going to happen. That stuff's still the same as it's going to be and has been my whole life. There has been things that have improved, right? I'm not physically a wreck from that. Interestingly enough, I do have some wear and tear on my neck from all those years of it.
Yeah.
I definitely constantly get chiropractor treatment, and I've had other things looked at over the years just because there's a lot of physical wear and tear because I had it pretty bad as a kid. But yeah, I still deal with all the tics and things. I think, I'll go back and say this. I don't struggle with it as enough anymore because of my outlook on it. And the reason I say that is because I was kind of frustrated and angry for many early years of my life, just because I'm young, I'm not mature. I don't understand why I'm dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I realized that I might have more of a purpose, because of this, there was a point when I was like early teenager, I started to have this, I went from being frustrated, kind of hiding inside this kind of middle purgatory area where I thought, when I got through these first 10, 11, 12 years of my life,
mm-hmm.
the heck with it. I don't care what anybody thinks. It was kind of like this forget you attitude, right?
Right.
In a sense where I've gone through enough already in my first set of my life. I'm not afraid of anything anymore, in a sense, right? That was my immature kind of battle. But it was a good thing because I wasn't angry. I was actually more like, hey, you know what? I'm not even going to, I've been through stuff now. Like, there's nothing anybody could say to me at that point. I was 12 and older. There's nothing you could have said to me that I would have made me offended or I had done it all. Like, there's nothing you're going to say to me. You're not going to offend me at this point.
Right.
So that was kind of my attitude. It was kind of a step in the positive direction. And then a couple of years after that, I started to realize, you know what, I have a real purpose. I can have a real purpose with this. And I understand that I may not beat this thing every day or even the rest of my life, but I know how to manage it. I know how to put myself in situations, right, where I can at least, be positive and better use that energy. So that's really how it's changed my adult outlook in life. It's allowed me to obviously have a life and a wife and kids and things of that nature. Because reality is, if I was just miserable all day and down in the dumps, who knows, if I would have been, some of my wife wouldn't want to be around or anything like that. So
yeah.
It really got to a point where I realized I went from being scared and hiding to this is who I am, and I'm really embracing it.
Wow. So with considering the power of the positive outlook, are there other ways of managing your more difficult tics that you've had to employ to, is it something I'm always interested to hear if there's, there's any rituals or tricks that you have that seem to kind of work for you that might also possibly work for somebody else who has a similar set of tics?
For me, I really am big on breathing. So this is something where if I'm in a certain so a couple things. So, breathing is a big thing for me, just calming myself down, right? And see, I'm a lot more aware of it. And older you get, you see it coming and you realize it's stressful. I'm just aware of my situation. Am I putting myself in stressful situations that I don't have to, right? Am I stressing about something I don't need to?
Right.
Is it work related? Is it life related? There's all kinds of triggers, right? There's all kinds of foods you can eat. I mean, if I get myself a, candy bar at one point because I wanted something to eat, and I realized after an hour later, I'm all over the place. So maybe I shouldn't be eating sugar, right? I mean, those things are all, you can't be perfect about it, but there's things you consider about what you put into your body, in that sense, what I put into it, what I do with it. Something I need to get better at, and I can better is really just exercise, being outside, right? Those kinds of things. Just managing my, not being inside all day, cooped up in a tense position, right? Getting up, moving around, getting active. There's just a lot of things that you start to notice, like, hey, you know what? This has helped me. Same with athletics. I mentioned I can go, I played athletics as a kid, and even now I could go out and do things athletic wise and not have any real issues. So I start to be more aware of when I'm building up stress and anxiety or anything like that. I need to be able to manage it before it becomes a problem. So yeah, I just breathing, getting loose, getting outside, stretching, just trying to calm and trying to find maybe what's stressing me out or what's causing me, triggering me to be a little more wired. I think that's really important. I think that's extremely important, just to, you know yourself better than anybody. You start to, after years and years of doing this, you start to see some of the warning signs or the trigger points that can cause that.
So, I mean, stress is obviously a pretty common thing that we hear as far as like a trigger, something that I'm going to tell my dog to shut up real quick. Hold on. Hey, Pip. Yeah, the stress piece. I mean, that's I would say stress and excitement kind of neck and neck are the things that really kind of set off my tics, or something that I'm really, really interested in. As far as just maybe not an activity I'm doing, but maybe I just see something that looks intriguing to me. Like apparently that's when I start ticking. And the excitement piece, and that would also, I guess, extend into nervousness. And I would really flare up with tics before I would get on stage when I played music back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that happens with you? Kind of like this sort of like quick storm of tics that gets diffused by the act of playing?
I still, to this day, after many years, I've traveled all over the country, been fortunate to do that, get massive anxiety rush before I walk up on stage. I mean, I've played in front of thousands of people, and I could still be playing, at a smaller place and still get a massive rush of anxiety. It's just the mental state. Yeah, it happens all the time. And I have to remind myself that this is good. This is a good thing. It means you're going to do something positive. You're going to do something great.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I still to this day get massive overrun of anxiety.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that feel. I mean, it's exhilarating that having that nervousness feeling where you feel really anxious, you feel really shaky, and I'm speaking for myself, but then getting up on stage, it's almost like you can feel the chemical change in your body. Like your head feels different, and things start to feel good when you start playing, and you kind of get into that zone. And
so I played a church, which is pretty big. I mean, some of the videos you've seen in the church, that's a pretty large venue. It's not a huge church, but the venue's big, right? We play in there, and I played last Sunday, and I went up on stage and I sat down. There's a little countdown. We had 10 seconds till we started.
Yeah.
And I got this massive anxiety rush to the point where I was basically nauseous, like I was dizzy. Yeah. And I just had to tell myself, you got this. You've done this a million times. You know exactly what this is. Just fight through it, start playing, and you'll be fine. And sure enough, I was fine. I was for the first service. We did 2 services, and by the time we got to the third song, I didn't have anything the rest of the morning. So it's amazing the battle your mind. And this goes for anything. Your mind can really battle you. Whatever your struggle is, your mind knows what it is and likes to play these games and accelerate that.
Right.
And you just have to be aware of what it is. And you know what? I've done this before. I'm going to, beat this, and I'm going to get through it. And it's pretty incredible though, how powerful that can be.
Yeah. But that's a really great way of handling it. Just sort of identifying it for what it is. It's actually kind of a recent thing for me, because I'll go into periods of depression, and when things get really bad, the thing I kind of say out loud to myself is like, and I don't know if this is the most responsible thing to do, but it works for me. I just say, this is fake. this is fake. Like this,
Mm-hmm.
it's not real. This is going to change. This is fake. The real thing is going to happen soon, and the real thing is going to be good. And
Yeah.
it's just, just trying to pinpoint it for what it is and understand it, kind of seeing over the fence as to, what's ahead and how this thing is going to get resolved. I mean, it's really difficult to slip into that mindset to know that you need to do that, but being able to do that.
Yeah. And the mind is amazing. Depression is a huge issue in this country, in this world, as you know, and it's only accelerated by dealing with other struggles, right? People, there's a lot of people Tourette's have depression. I deal with it too. I've dealt with it time and time again, from when I was a kid to now. You're right. It just accelerates. You have to almost kick yourself in the face, right? I mean, that's the way that I do things in life. I'm not at this point in my life, I don't have time to really sit around and play the whole game. I'm the same way. It's like, it's the mental side of punching myself in the face and saying, look, get off your butt and you're going to get over this right now. I mean, that's kind of the tough love, but that's really how I function with that, because this is just, to me, obviously I don't deal with other people, just mentally inside. I'm thinking, you know what? And I just remind myself, this isn't real. Look at what you have in your life. Look what you've come through. This spot right now is nothing compared to what you've dealt with. Right. And that's really, you're right. You have to be able to kind of slap yourself in the face and say, look, don't let this is exactly what's happening right now. What's your mind's trying to, get you just out of it. Let's go, and it works though. As you know, it helps. I mean, you have to, kind of be your own worst enemy and at the same time. So, I agree with you. It's pretty powerful how that affects your life.
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, one of the biggest points that you were just talking about and kind of healing by going through it is just being able to talk to other people who, have a similar background to me with TS. I mean, it could be anybody from any walk of life, but just having that common denominator, you inevitably find links, and just these weird connections and things to talk about where you're like, nobody else knows about this but us. And I mean, that really helps me kind of get through everything and not really mind myself quite as much, or, not get so down on myself. And, it's just that there are a lot of other people dealing totally with the same thing. It might look different, it might sound different, but I mean, they're dealing with the same thing. And it's just nice to have that connection.
And to be honest, this goes even at a bigger scale. I mean, people deal with all kinds of struggles, right? Whether they have a massive disorder or they have just a tough life. I mean, it's really hard to do things on your own. It's really hard to, get through, right, any kind of depression or struggle you have, but you just have to remind yourself, right, that you have all these great things and look at the great things. It's just, that to me, the positivity side of it has really changed my life. It really did, because I didn't have the time or the energy. There was enough, bad going on in my life, in the world, whatever, everybody's got it, where I didn't want to waste my time sitting in there. So I had to kind of remind myself, either get involved with people like you're saying who have similar struggles, or just talk with people, get in society, right? Running away from it, it's not going to fix it. I got to address this head on, or whether it's doing it my own, getting support. I got to get out of this though, because it's not, I agree with you. It's kind of not real. I'm not saying you don't have real struggles, but this moment you're struggling is not, indicative of your life. Right. Exactly. This is just a moment that you're down. You need to get up and get back to the things you really love.
Well, man, is there anything I haven't asked about that you think's important, or anything that you think we should highlight? 'Cause I mean, I'm really happy with how this conversation has gone. I mean, we've hit a lot of really cool points, and it's been really relatable.
I always just, again, my outlook on things is really, I believe that everybody was made with a purpose. I really believe that. I don't believe there's accidents. I don't believe, things happen for no reason. And so, people that deal with Tourette's specifically, it's difficult. It's extremely difficult. I still deal with it. Obviously, we pretty much have this until we're dead, and that's the reality. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't have it any other way, because it's made me different in a good way, right? It's made me, I'm not normal. I'm not a guy, I go upstream for sure against the grain. and I'm proud of that though. And that's the thing. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the fact that's what my life is, about. And I just think it's important that people, understand that you can look at it two ways. You can look at your struggle as a handicap, or you can look at it as a positive, right? Or as a purpose. I hope it's to have more opportunities to speak to even younger, especially young kids that have Tourette's. Because, there's still not a great awareness of it. I mean, it's gotten better over the years. It's still not, it's not as bad as it was in 1988, but
right.
it's
Yeah.
it's more now from a global standpoint of just, accepting others, of course. But, I just hope that more awareness happens, and I'd love to help be a part of that.
Well, how can people reach out to you if people have been listening to this? They at least want to find you on social media. What's the quickest way to get up with you?
Yeah, social media is probably the easiest way. My handle is Mike Miller Drums. It's really simple. Surprised I even got that handle as long as I do, because it's a simple name. But yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. I check that a lot. My emails, if you hit, contact, my email's on there as well. I would love just to talk to people, encourage them, and if there's an opportunity to do more than that, any kind of event for people dealing with this, I would be more than happy to do it.
Thanks so much for listening. Please send your feedback to tourettespodcast@gmail.com or head to the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. Connect with Mike. He's Mike Miller Drums on Instagram. Tons of videos of him playing live that you can check out. I'll link to it all at tourettespodcast.com. I've got some news to pay attention to here from the Tourette Association of America. They've launched a new fundraising campaign for research. And I know I've personally donated to research before. And even though I got that, that good feeling of having contributed, I've got TS, I contribute to research, but I also don't feel that quick satisfaction that my dollar really had any immediate impact. Do you know what I mean? Like, I make my donation, it goes to this ambiguous category called research. Like, where did my dollar go? And I do donate more than $1, but you know what I mean? The Tourette Association totally gets this. They know that it kind of feels like you're just kind of throwing your money at something that feels so far into the future, maybe kind of hard to understand. But in reality, it does have a direct and positive impact immediately, right away. And again, it is a direct impact on the lives of people with TS. And you can learn more about this at tourette.org/funding-research. Again, tourette.org/funding-research. And that is where you can meet 4 grantees for 2019 who are doing Tourette science. 4 awesome researchers looking specifically at Tourette. You can look at who these people are and exactly what they're working on, what their research projects are. And each one of them has a little button next to it that says, fund this project. So you can learn about it and you can pick where you want your dollars to go. This is really, really cool. And again, it's tourette.org/funding-research. I want to thank the Tourette Association of America for being the primary sponsor of this global podcast. They're online at tourette.org. And you can follow along with this podcast in many ways. Tourette'sPodcast.com, Tourette's Podcast on Instagram, Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook, at Tourette's Pod on Twitter, patreon.com/Tourette's Podcast. That's where you can support the show. And of course, visit geeksrising.com for this podcast and others that are worth your time checking out. Shout out to my friends with the On the Subject podcast. That's one of the Geeks Rising podcasts. It's so funny, and they tease out a lot of funny stuff from pop culture movies, and that's kind of what it's about. They'll take pop culture movies and kind of analyze them and how they tie in with the times, for better or worse. It's really great. Again, you can find that at geeksrising.com, which gives all kinds of support to Tourette's podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and we'll talk to you in the meantime. This is Ben.